Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 4 about the legislative branch. It's Lesson 5 about the leaders of Congress. In this lesson, you'll learn about the importance of parties being either the majority or the minority within a particular House of Congress. You'll learn about the role of the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. You'll learn about the roles of majority and minority leaders in the House and in the Senate. You'll learn about the responsibility of whips in the House and the Senate. And finally, you'll learn about committee selection in the House and in the Senate. This slide shows the distribution of seats in the current House of Representatives. You'll see that of the 435 members of the House, 3 seats are currently vacant. Democrats occupy 186 of the seats, and Republicans 246. This means that the Republicans have a clear majority. Now, this is important because whichever political party has a majority at a given time in the House of Representatives entirely controls the agenda there. As long as they can stick together, they can always outvote the opposition and do anything that they want. In the United States Senate, currently with its smaller number of 100 senators, we see this distribution. There are 2 independents in the Senate who generally meet with and caucus with and cooperate with the Democrats. There are 44 Democrats and 54 Republicans. So again, like with the House of Representatives, the Republicans have a clear majority. This enables them, when they stick together, to win any simple majority vote. But as you'll eventually find out as we move on in this unit, having a simple majority isn't enough in the Senate like it is in the House of Representatives. It's still an important advantage, but it's not as clear an advantage as it is in the House. Now let's talk about the leadership of both the House and the Senate, beginning with the House. The Constitution says that the House of Representatives shall choose a Speaker. This is the one office in the House of Representatives that the Constitution establishes for them. The other offices they get to choose for themselves. So when we diagram the leadership in the House of Representatives, we have to begin with the Speaker of the House. In the diagram that we build here, I'm going to have the box for the Speaker in the House with a very thick outline around it. This will remind you that the Speaker really is the organizational leader of the House of Representatives. He's the most important person in the House, and because of the way the House works, he wields direct power over his majority party, which then controls the entire chamber. The current Speaker of the House, in case you're curious, is a man named Paul Ryan, a representative from Wisconsin. Now, I'm not going to make you remember Paul Ryan for our exam that we'll eventually have, but many people just wonder when I talk about who the leader of the House is. So I thought I'd include this picture to let you know who is the current Speaker of the House of Representatives. Oops. The minority party has its own leadership structure in the House of Representatives. They are led by a minority leader. Currently, the minority leader in the House of Representatives is a woman named Nancy Pelosi, who's a representative from California. Again, you don't need to remember that for the exam, but I thought you might be curious. The minority leader is then assisted by a minority whip and a collection of assistant whips. Just like with the majority whip, the job of the minority whip is to go around among the members of the minority party and try to keep them voting the right way, the way that the minority leader wants. So the minority leader in the House of Representatives works to keep her party organized to oppose the majority party. Now, because of how things work in the House of Representatives, so long as the majority can stick together, they don't really care what the minority thinks. They can do everything without the minority. So the only real reason for the minority to stay organized is to, 1, present an alternative to the public. They want the public to see that there is another functioning political party there. They want to make their views known by voting together, just as the majority votes together. And also, personally, for the minority leader, she wants to demonstrate she's a good leader so that if after the next election, her political party gains enough seats to become the majority party in the House, she can move up to become the Speaker of the House. So while there's really no reason for the majority party to even care what the minority party is doing, what interaction they do have is clearly one way. The minority leader is below the Speaker of the House. The minority leader, to what extent she has any influence, is influence of trying to reach up and trying to get somebody above her to do things maybe the way she wants. Just as the people in the hierarchy of the majority party are below the Speaker, the minority leader is also below the Speaker. But I drew that relationship with a dashed line to show that it's a relationship that isn't really important, isn't really there all the time. It's not a solid, direct reporting. It's not like the minority leader reports to the Speaker. Instead, she's just kind of off the side doing her own thing. But to the extent they do have interactions, she's clearly considered to be an inferior player in the House of Representatives, so long as her party is the minority party. So now let's talk about leadership in the Senate. In many ways, it's similar to the leadership in the House, but it has some very significant differences. The Constitution says that the Vice President of the United States will in fact be the President of the Senate. So let's begin our diagram of Senate leadership by putting the Vice President of the United States there. But we need to note something else about what it says in the Constitution concerning the Vice President's leadership of the Senate. But we'll get to that in just a moment. First, I wanted to let you know who the Vice President is, who the President of the Senate. You may probably be aware of this. It's Joe Biden. He was, previous to becoming Vice President, a member of the United States Senate from Delaware. And now he still potentially gets to participate in the Senate as the President of the Senate. But the Constitution says that he cannot vote unless the Senate is equally divided. So what that means is that unless they're in a 50-50 tie, he has no real power to do anything there. While, yes, he's the President of the Senate, he could show up every day at the Senate, sit at the front of the room with a gavel in his hand and conduct the meetings. That's really kind of a boring job. It doesn't have a lot of power that goes along with it. So the Vice President's never there. But the Constitution provides an alternative if the Vice President's not there, because he only shows up when it's a 50-50 tie to break the tie, which hardly ever happens. The Constitution says that there'll be a President pro tempore, in other words, a temporary president, for when the actual President of the Senate is not present. Remember, the President of the Senate is the Vice President of the United States. So we need to add another part of the leadership of the Senate to our diagram, the President pro tempore. Now, I have the little box for the Vice President here in white because the Vice President is President of the Senate regardless of who the majority party is and whether the Vice President's a member of that party. The President pro tempore position is a little bit different. Because the President pro tempore is chosen by the Senate itself, that person is always going to be a member of the majority party, represented by the red boxes here, like on the slides that I built for the House of Representatives. So the President pro tempore, as a member of the majority party, you might think would be sort of the head then of the party, but that's not true. For reasons that you'll understand more as this unit continues, and in future lessons I explain about how a law is actually created and the Senate's role in that. The President pro tempore, like the Vice President of the United States, has no real power in the Senate. So this position of President pro tempore, which is provided for by the Constitution, has become a ceremonial position. It's a position that's given to the member of the majority party who has been serving in the Senate the longest. Currently, that's a senator from Utah named Orrin Hatch. Again, you don't really need to remember who Orrin Hatch is, but I thought you might be curious. So who are the real leaders then of the Senate? If it's not the Vice President of the United States, who according to the Constitution is the President of the Senate, and it's also not the President pro tempore, who, according to the Constitution, is supposed to fill in when the vice president isn't there. Well, the majority party has a majority leader, like in the House of Representatives, where there's a majority leader also. But in the Senate, that's where the real power of leadership lies, not with the vice president or the president pro tempore. It's the majority leader who's really in charge. The current majority leader is a man named Mitch McConnell, a senator from Kentucky. Like with all the other names of people that I'm giving you in this lesson, this is just for you to fill your curiosity. You don't need to know Mitch McConnell for the exam. Now, just like in the House of Representatives, the majority leader is assisted by a majority whip and a series of other whips that help the majority whip. Again, their job is to try to round up votes to help pass whatever the majority leader wants passed. And then, just like in the House, the Senate has committees also. And just like in the House, those committees are organized so that the majority party always has a majority on each committee, and the chairperson of each committee is a member of the majority party. Then also, just like in the House, in the Senate, there's a minority leadership also. There's a minority leader. In the United States Senate, that happens to be a senator from Nevada named Harry Reid. And the minority leader is assisted by a minority whip and a collection of assistant whips. Now, there's also a relationship between the minority leader in the Senate and the real leader of the Senate, just as there is somewhat of a relationship in the House between the minority leader there and the Speaker. But the relationship between the minority leader and the majority leader in the Senate is much more equal. Notice the difference that I have in this diagram compared to the other one. When I diagrammed the House and I had the minority leader interacting with the Speaker of the House, the arrow only went one direction. It went upward. It was the minority leader essentially reporting to the Speaker, because the Speaker doesn't really care what the minority leader thinks about there. But because the rules in the Senate are different, rules that I'll explain in a later lesson when I talk about how the Senate actually functions, the minority leader has some real power in the Senate. The majority leader has to actually care what the minority leader thinks. That's why I have the arrow go both directions here, showing that these two people really interact and have to deal with each other, even if they don't like to. Currently, the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, and the minority leader, Harry Reid, don't really like each other. But nonetheless, they get together regularly to have meetings to talk about what they can work out and work on together. And again, as I've said, in a later lesson, I'll explain why that's really true, that they're forced to work together, and why the minority leader actually has some influence over the majority leader in the Senate, unlike in the House. All right, that does it for our lesson. Now let's review. In which of the houses of Congress are the Democrats a majority? Are they a majority in the Senate currently, or a majority in the House of Representatives? Are they a majority in both, or are they a majority in neither of them? The Democratic Party does not hold a majority in either the House or the Senate right now. Who is the president of the Senate? Is it a speaker? Is it a majority leader? Is it the president pro tempore? Or is it the vice president of the United States? The president of the Senate, according to the Constitution, is the vice president of the United States. Who is the organizational leader of the Senate? In other words, who's really in charge there? Is it the vice president of the United States? Is it the president pro tempore? Is it the speaker? Or is it the majority leader? Well, the reality is the way things work in the Senate, because of the unique rules that they have for their operations, the majority leader is the actual leader of the Senate. Who is the organizational leader of the House of Representatives? Is it the Vice President of the United States? Is it the President pro tempore? Is it the Speaker? Or is it the majority leader? The organizational leader, in other words, the person really in charge in the House of Representatives, is the Speaker of the House. What do whips do in the House and the Senate? Do they round up votes? Do they punish those who leave the party? Do they suggest legislation? or do they negotiate with the other party? Whips round up votes within their own party. The leader makes a decision about how the party should vote on a particular issue, and then the whips go around and try to convince party members to actually vote that way. How are congressional committees composed? Are they composed with the majority and the minority represented equally? Or does the majority always have more seats on these committees? Or is each committee organized differently? Or do the chairs of each committee decide how they'll be organized? They're organized so that the majority party always has more seats than the minority party. So whatever business the committee does, the majority can always outvote the minority and win. Okay, that does it for this lesson. The next lesson from Unit 4 will be Lesson 6 about the committee process.